Pam Bondi is facing what sources are calling the most serious accountability threats any attorney general has confronted in decades, and the pressure is coming from so many directions simultaneously that she might not be able to survive all of them. We're not talking about angry criticism or political rhetoric. We're talking about reports that bipartisan lawmakers are drafting inherent contempt resolutions that could fine her personally for every single day she refuses to comply with federal law.
The reality is Pam Bondi has obfuscated for months. She first said there were no more documents to be seen. Now she's admitting and releasing hundreds of thousands of documents, but it is an incomplete release with too many redactions.
That House Democrats are preparing actual articles of impeachment for willfully violating the Epstein Files Transparency Act and using federal agents to coerce state governments. That her letter to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz demanding voter rolls and welfare data in exchange for ending aggressive ICE operations is being characterized by legal experts as straight-up blackmail. And sources suggest what might make this moment different from previous accountability efforts is that Bondi has given her opponents concrete legal violations they can point to. She's admitted in court filings that the Justice Department remains in continuing violation of congressional statute. She's sent letters that look like extortion on their face. And now lawmakers who wrote the laws she's breaking are preparing to use congressional tools that don't require her own Justice Department to prosecute her. But before we break down everything, please subscribe to our channel, John Brown Show. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what's actually happening with these accountability efforts and why sources suggest Bondi might be in more serious jeopardy than previous Trump officials who faced congressional pressure. Because the combination of the Epstein Files situation and the Minnesota letter creates what legal experts are calling a perfect storm of documented violations that give Congress multiple paths to pursue consequences. Reports indicate Representatives Thomas Massie, a Republican, and Ro Khanna, a Democrat who co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act, are absolutely furious that Bondi has blown past the December 19th deadline and released less than 1% of required documents. And they're preparing to use inherent contempt, a constitutional power that bypasses Bondi's own Justice Department and allows the House to impose daily fines directly.
The Justice Department's document dump this afternoon does not comply with Thomas Massie and my Epstein Transparency Act. They released one document from a New York grand jury of 119 pages, totally blacked out.
Meanwhile, sources suggest House Democrats are drafting impeachment articles citing not just the Epstein violations, but also Bondi's letter to Minnesota that demanded voter rolls and welfare data in language that looks like coercion. When you combine statutory violations that are admitted in court filings with apparent extortion of state governments, you potentially have grounds for removal that might be harder for Republicans to defend than typical partisan accusations. And if Bondi faces personal financial consequences through inherent contempt while simultaneously fighting impeachment proceedings, she could become too toxic for Trump to continue defending. Let's start by documenting exactly what Bondi has done regarding the Epstein Files Transparency Act and why sources suggest this represents such clear-cut violation of federal law that even Republicans might struggle to defend it. Because this isn't about disputed interpretations or prosecutorial discretion. Reports indicate the Justice Department has admitted in court filings that they're violating the statute and will remain in violation for the foreseeable future. The Epstein Files Transparency Act allegedly passed Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support. Thomas Massie is Libertarian Republican from Kentucky. Ro Khanna is Progressive Democrat from California. They don't agree on much, but they both believed Americans deserve to know what the government knows about Jeffrey Epstein's network of wealthy and powerful enablers. The law they wrote was reportedly simple and clear. Release all unclassified Epstein-related records by December 19, 2025. No exceptions, no excuses, just transparency as Congress mandated. Sources indicate Bondi looked at that law and essentially decided it doesn't apply to her. The deadline came and went. The DOJ released approximately 12,000 documents out of more than 2 million that might fall under the act. That's less than 1%. Think about what that violation means. Congress passed a law. Trump signed it. It became binding statute. And the Attorney General is simply refusing to comply, not arguing the law is unconstitutional and seeking judicial review, not claiming some legitimate privilege prevents release, just ignoring the statutory requirement because she apparently doesn't want to release files that might embarrass Trump or reveal his connections to Epstein. And reports suggest it gets worse than just missing the deadline.
And our law requires them to explain redactions. There's not a single explanation for why that entire document was redacted. We have not seen the draft indictment.
Critics noticed that documents being released were heavily redacted in suspicious ways. At least one image of Trump with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell was allegedly removed from the DOJ website after initially being posted. An unsigned memo claimed there was no client list and no basis to investigate uncharged individuals. Staff were reportedly instructed to flag any documents mentioning Trump by name. The entire review process allegedly looked designed to protect the president rather than provide genuine transparency Congress mandated. Sources indicate the Justice Department actually told a federal judge they would remain in continuing violation of the law. Not that they're working toward compliance and just need more time, that they will remain in violation for the foreseeable future. When a law enforcement agency admits it's breaking the law and plans to continue breaking it, that's not prosecutorial discretion. That might be open defiance of congressional authority. And it's exactly the kind of clear violation that makes inherent contempt appropriate. But let's talk about what inherent contempt actually is and why sources suggest it could be particularly effective against Bondi in ways that normal contempt citations wouldn't be. Because most people don't understand this rarely used congressional power and why it's so significant that Massey and Khanna are preparing to deploy it. Regular contempt of Congress allegedly works through criminal referrals. House votes to hold someone in contempt, then refers the matter to the Justice Department for prosecution. The Attorney General decides whether to bring charges. Obviously, that system doesn't work when the person being held in contempt is the Attorney General herself. Bondi isn't going to prosecute herself for defying Congress, so normal contempt becomes meaningless. But inherent contempt reportedly bypasses that entire problem. Under inherent contempt authority, the House itself can impose penalties directly without going through courts or Justice Department. It's constitutional power that Congress has possessed since the founding, but has used sparingly throughout American history precisely because it's so powerful and constitutionally fraught. Think about how this would work in practice. Reports suggest the House passes inherent contempt resolution with simple majority vote. The resolution imposes daily fines on Bondi personally for every day she remains in non-compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, not fines on the Justice Department budget, fines that come out of her own bank account. Sources indicate the amounts could be substantial, thousands of dollars per day potentially, and they accumulate until she complies with the law Congress passed. There's allegedly no appeal to courts that might be sympathetic to Trump, no role for the Justice Department she controls, just direct enforcement by Congress against an official who's violating federal statute. That personal financial consequence reportedly creates different calculus than institutional disputes. When your own money is at stake, when fines are accumulating daily, compliance becomes more attractive than defiance. And what makes this particularly significant is that it's bipartisan. Sources suggest Massey is Republican, not some anti-Trump moderate. He's libertarian conservative who believes in congressional authority and limited government. When a Republican congressman is willing to use inherent contempt against a Republican attorney general, that indicates the violation is so egregious that party loyalty doesn't overcome it. Massey and Khanna wrote this law together. They're furious it's being ignored, and they're prepared to use constitutional tools to enforce it. Share this video with everyone you know because there's reportedly another element that makes inherent contempt particularly appropriate here. The violation is ongoing. It's not some past misconduct that Congress is investigating. Bondi is violating the law right now, today, and admits she'll continue violating it. Inherent contempt is designed for exactly that situation. When an official is in continuing defiance of congressional mandate and normal enforcement mechanisms don't work. The daily fines create mounting pressure to comply rather than just punishing past violations. But the Epstein files aren't the only front where Bondi is facing serious accountability threats. Sources indicate her letter to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz might have created even more explosive legal problem because it looks so much like textbook extortion. And the timing coming right after federal agents killed an ICU nurse during immigration raid in Minneapolis allegedly makes it impossible to interpret the letter as anything other than coercion. Reports suggest Bondi sent letter to Governor Walz demanding several specific things: access to Minnesota's Medicaid records, SNAP benefits data, full voter registration records, and she insisted Walz end sanctuary policies and cooperate fully with federal immigration enforcement. The clear implication allegedly was that if Minnesota didn't provide this data and change these policies, the aggressive federal operations that had just resulted in someone's death would continue or escalate. Think about what that letter actually says when you strip away the legal language. Give us your welfare records and voter rolls, or we won't back off with armed federal agents. That's not law enforcement. Sources suggest that's using the threat of continued federal pressure, potentially including more violence, to extract policy concessions and sensitive data that Minnesota isn't legally required to provide. When you use armed force as leverage to get what you want politically, legal experts are calling that extortion. Governor Walz's response was reportedly devastating. He called Bondi's letter a collection of falsehoods, suggested she focus on the 2 million unreleased Epstein documents instead of trying to bully his state. And his administration's lawyers filed documents with federal court arguing that Bondi's letter proves the DOJ is using approximately 3,000 armed federal agents as coercion to win policy concessions they can't get through proper channels. And sources suggest that court filing is critical because it creates legal record of what Bondi did. Not just political accusations, but actual evidence submitted under oath to federal judge. The letter itself is exhibit. The context of violence and intimidation surrounding it is documented. The interpretation that it constitutes illegal coercion is now part of official court record. That's the kind of evidence that could support both impeachment articles and potential criminal prosecution if Bondi ever loses the protection of office. And now, there's reportedly another dimension to the Minnesota situation that makes it particularly damaging for Bondi: the demand for voter registration records. Sources suggest there's no legitimate law enforcement purpose for the Attorney General to have state voter rolls. The connection to immigration enforcement is tenuous at best, which raises obvious question: why does Bondi want that data? And the disturbing possible answer is that Trump administration wants voter information so they can challenge registrations, purge voters, or interfere with elections in ways they couldn't accomplish through normal legal processes. Using armed federal agents to extract election data looks like exactly the kind of election interference that impeachment was designed to address. But let's talk about the impeachment proceedings that sources suggest House Democrats are preparing to launch against Bondi. Because while impeachment is unlikely to result in removal given Republican control of Congress, the process itself could be devastating politically and create lasting record of Bondi's abuses. Reports indicate the articles being drafted would cite multiple grounds for removal. First, willfully violating the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The statute is clear. The deadline passed. DOJ admitted non-compliance. That's straightforward violation of federal law. Second, using federal office to protect Trump by scrubbing documents and removing images. Sources suggest at least one photo of Trump with Epstein and Maxwell was taken down from DOJ website. Staff were allegedly told to flag documents mentioning Trump. The entire review process looks designed to shield the president rather than provide transparency Congress mandated. That's abuse of office for personal benefit of the president who appointed you. Third, coercing state governments through letters like the Minnesota one that use armed federal agents as leverage. Reports indicate that's not normal law enforcement. That's weaponizing Justice Department for political purposes, using federal power to extract concessions rather than following law. And it sets precedent that could be used against any state that disagrees with federal administration. That's impeachable abuse. Think about what impeachment process would look like even if removal doesn't happen. Committee hearings where Massey and Khanna testify about how their bipartisan legislation is being violated. Minnesota officials documenting the extortion attempt. Career Justice Department lawyers who were fired testifying about the systematic dismantling of civil rights and corruption units. Each hearing creates more evidence of abuse. Each witness adds credibility to the charges. The accumulated record becomes devastating even if final Senate vote doesn't reach conviction threshold. And sources suggest there's strategic element to pursuing impeachment even when removal is unlikely. It forces Republicans to go on record defending Bondi's conduct. Do they vote to excuse Attorney General who admits violating federal law? Do they defend extortion letters to state governors? Every vote creates political liability for Republicans in competitive districts. And if Democrats take House in midterms, which polling suggests is possible, those impeachment articles could be revived with actual chance of passage. Share this with everyone, because Senator Adam Schiff has reportedly called Bondi's Epstein violations willful and demanded she testify under oath before Senate Judiciary Committee. That's another front where pressure is mounting. If she testifies, she has to explain under oath why documents are being withheld and images removed. If she refuses to testify, that's additional evidence of consciousness of guilt. Either option creates problems for her politically and potentially legally. But what might make the impeachment case particularly compelling is that the Epstein stonewalling and Minnesota coercion aren't isolated incidents. Sources indicate they're part of systematic transformation of the Justice Department that The Atlantic and other outlets have documented extensively. Reports suggest Bondi has fired over 230 career attorneys. These are professional prosecutors who maintain institutional knowledge and independence across different administrations. Removing them allegedly eliminates people who might resist political pressure or object to illegal conduct. She's reportedly dismantled civil rights units that could investigate discrimination and voting rights violations. That's convenient when your administration is conducting immigration enforcement that critics characterize as targeting people based on race. When you don't have Civil Rights Division asking questions, you can operate with less oversight. She's allegedly gutted corruption units that investigate white-collar crime and official misconduct. That's useful when your administration and its allies might be vulnerable to exactly those kinds of investigations. By destroying the units that could hold them accountable, they create impunity. Think about what this systematic dismantling reveals about Bondi's intentions. Sources suggest this isn't about making Justice Department more efficient or focusing resources on priorities. This is about eliminating institutional checks on presidential power, about removing career professionals who understand their duty is to law rather than to whoever holds office, about transforming independent agency into political tool that serves Trump's interests rather than pursuing justice. And reports indicate the damage will outlast Bondi's tenure. Even if she's eventually removed or resigns, the people she fired are gone. The units she dismantled are destroyed. The institutional knowledge that took decades to build has been deliberately eliminated. Rebuilding will allegedly require years, even if future administration tries. That lasting harm is exactly what Trump wanted. Permanent weakening of Justice Department's capacity to constrain presidential abuses. Mother Jones reportedly compiled list of Bondi's actions they characterize as impeachable abuses. The Epstein stonewalling. January 6th, pardons for people who violently attacked the Capitol. Political targeting of Trump's critics through investigations and subpoenas. The Minnesota coercion. Each alone might be dismissed as aggressive but arguably legal exercise of prosecutorial discretion. But sources suggest when you look at pattern, when you see systematic transformation of Justice Department into Trump's weapon and shield, the cumulative case becomes overwhelming. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because there's reportedly another element. The firing of career attorneys creates witnesses. These are people who saw what Bondi did from inside Justice Department, who have firsthand knowledge of political pressure and illegal conduct, who might be willing to testify in impeachment proceedings or congressional investigations. When you purge institution, You create an army of potential whistleblowers who have nothing left to lose and might want to expose what they witnessed. That could provide evidence, making impeachment case impossible for Republicans to ignore. But let's talk about the political dynamics that will determine whether these accountability efforts actually succeed. Because sources suggest the legal case against Bondi is strong, but the political obstacles are formidable. Republicans control the House currently. Impeachment requires House majority to vote articles. Conviction requires 2/3 Senate vote. Neither chamber has those numbers against Republican Attorney General unless significant Republican defections occur. So why pursue these efforts if they're unlikely to succeed? Reports indicate several strategic reasons. First, the process matters even when outcome is predetermined. Drafting articles of impeachment forces public accounting of Bondi's conduct, creates formal record for history of what she did and why it was wrong. That record matters for future accountability, even if immediate removal doesn't happen. Second, inherent contempt doesn't require conviction. Sources suggest it only needs simple majority in House to impose daily fines. If Massey and Khanna can get enough Republicans uncomfortable with blatant statutory violation, they might actually pass inherent contempt resolution even if full impeachment fails. And those daily personal fines create real pressure regardless of whether Senate would convict. Third, the political environment could shift. Reports indicate Trump's approval has been declining. Republican majority in House is razor thin. Multiple GOP retirements are creating additional vulnerabilities. If Democrats take House in November midterms, which polling suggests is possible, suddenly impeachment becomes viable. Articles drafted now could be revived with new Congress that has votes to pass them. And if Senate margin is close enough, conviction might become possible if evidence is overwhelming and political costs of defending Bondi become too high. Think about what happens if these proceedings dominate news coverage heading into midterms. Voters see Attorney General who admits violating federal law, who sent letters that look like extortion, who's firing career prosecutors and dismantling civil rights protections. That becomes campaign issue about whether Republicans enable corruption and abuse of power. Sources suggest Democrats could make Bondi's conduct centerpiece of argument about why House control matters, why oversight is necessary, why accountability requires voting out enablers. And there's reportedly personal calculus for Bondi herself. If inherent contempt passes and daily fines start accumulating, if impeachment articles get drafted with detailed evidence, if state lawsuits over Minnesota coercion move forward, she might calculate that staying in position isn't worth the personal cost. That resigning and returning to private legal practice preserves wealth and reputation better than fighting multiple accountability battles simultaneously. Trump might pressure her to stay, but self-interest could pull her toward exit. Share this video with everyone you know because sources suggest there's also pressure from within Justice Department. Career prosecutors allegedly see what Bondi has done to their institution. Some might refuse to carry out illegal orders, others might leak information to Congress or media documenting abuses. When Attorney General has destroyed institutional loyalty, she can't count on subordinates to protect her. That internal opposition could provide evidence and testimony, making her position untenable even without formal removal. So what actually happens in the coming weeks with these accountability efforts? Because sources suggest several procedural steps that will determine whether Bondi faces real consequences or weathers this pressure, like Trump officials have weathered previous accountability attempts. First, reports indicate Massey and Khanna need to finish drafting inherent contempt resolution. Then it goes to House floor for vote. If simple majority passes it, daily fines begin immediately against Bondi personally. That's fastest path to actual consequence that doesn't depend on courts or Justice Department. Second, House Democrats need to formally introduce impeachment articles if they're serious about pursuing that route. Sources suggest introduction triggers committee process. Judiciary Committee would hold hearings, call witnesses, build record, eventually vote on whether to send articles to full House. Each step creates media coverage and political pressure, even if ultimate passage is uncertain. Third, Minnesota's lawsuit over the coercion letter needs to proceed through courts. Reports indicate if federal judge finds Bondi's letter constituted illegal pressure, that becomes additional evidence supporting impeachment and potentially criminal liability. Court ruling that Attorney General broke law is hard for Republicans to dismiss as partisan politics. Think about how these fronts interact. Inherent contempt creates personal financial pressure. Impeachment proceedings create political pressure. Court cases create legal jeopardy. Sources suggest Bondi has to fight all three simultaneously while continuing to run Justice Department and protect Trump. That's enormous burden even for someone with resources and support, and mistakes made fighting one battle could create ammunition for others. And there's reportedly Trump factor. How long does he stick with Bondi if she becomes liability? If inherent contempt fines are accumulating daily? If impeachment hearings are documenting Justice Department abuses? If her approval ratings crater and she becomes political poison? Trump might calculate that replacing her with someone less toxic serves his interests better than defending her indefinitely. He could throw her overboard to save himself if pressure becomes too intense. But sources suggest Bondi also knows things about Trump that he might not want exposed. Her role in Epstein stonewalling means she knows what's in those files. Her transformation of Justice Department was done on Trump's orders. If he abandons her, she could become cooperating witness rather than defender. That mutual leverage creates complicated dynamic where neither can safely turn on the other without risking mutual destruction. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because the timeline matters. Reports indicate if these accountability efforts gain momentum quickly, if inherent contempt passes before midterms, if impeachment articles get introduced while current Congress is still in session, that creates facts on ground before political composition potentially shifts. But if Republicans successfully delay until after November, and if they maintain House control, momentum could dissipate. The next few weeks might determine whether this moment produces actual accountability or becomes another instance of Trump officials escaping consequences. So here's what the movement to hold Pam Bondi accountable reveals about where Trump's Justice Department stands. An attorney general who has admitted in court filings that she's violating federal statute and will remain in violation indefinitely. A bipartisan pair of lawmakers who wrote the law she's breaking, preparing to use inherent contempt to impose personal daily fines. House Democrats drafting impeachment articles citing not just Epstein stonewalling, but also Minnesota coercion letter that legal experts characterize as extortion, and systematic destruction of Justice Department independence through firing of career attorneys and dismantling of civil rights and corruption units. The combination of concrete statutory violations and apparent extortion of state governments creates stronger case for accountability than typical political accusations. When Attorney General admits she's breaking law Congress passed, that's not disputed interpretation. That's violation on its face. When she sends letters demanding voter rolls and welfare data in exchange for ending armed federal operations, that's coercion that's hard to defend as legitimate law enforcement. The political obstacles remain formidable. Republicans control Congress and have consistently chosen Trump loyalty over accountability. But inherent contempt only needs simple majority and is bipartisan effort. Impeachment proceedings create record even if conviction doesn't happen. Court cases over Minnesota generate legal jeopardy independent of Congress. And if political environment shifts in November, what seems unlikely now could become inevitable with different congressional composition. For Trump, Bondi's vulnerability creates problems. She's been his legal battering ram against enemies and his shield against accountability. If she faces personal fines accumulating daily, if impeachment hearings dominate coverage, if she becomes too toxic to defend, he might need to find replacement attorney general. And confirmation process for new AG would expose Justice Department abuses that current leadership has buried. That's lose-lose situation where defending Bondi is costly, but replacing her is dangerous. The next few weeks determine whether this accountability moment produces actual consequences or dissipates like previous efforts, whether inherent contempt resolution passes and fines begin, whether impeachment articles get introduced and hearings scheduled, whether courts rule on Minnesota lawsuit, whether Republican defections materialize or party loyalty holds. The legal hooks exist. The evidence is documented. What's missing is political will that could emerge if public pressure becomes overwhelming, or if enough Republicans decide their own survival requires distancing from Bondi's abuses. Stay tuned.